Hey guys, welcome back to another Q&A. It is June 14th, 2020. This probably won't be out until the 15th or 16th once we get it out, but wanted to get it recorded today. And this will be a shorter one. I literally just posted the thread. It was just a little bit ago. So this one will be a little bit shorter than usual, but we had some good questions, so let's see. All right. How do you like to get digestion back on track after a bad case of food poisoning that might have cleared out gut flora? I don't know, I don't know if there's any direct connection between food poisoning clearing out gut flora. I mean, you have a lot of gut flora. Just because you get, diarrhea or something like that, or vomit, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to clear out all your gut flora. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to impact it some. How much, I'm not really sure. I don't know that there's any actual literature on that. But if you wanted to, if it's just a short bout of food poisoning, you could just use a strong probiotic as a replacement. Because, I mean, essentially a lot of the probiotic supplements, at least some of the better ones and stronger ones, all they're going to do is just replace what you might have lost. I don't really use probiotics with a lot of people on a regular basis other than through food and things. I don't use a lot of the really strong probiotics with people, everyone, as a staple supplement, because it's just not necessary, because our gut will regulate those things on its own. Except for, certain situations in which I will use them. But, if you wanted to just use a replacement, like I said, just replace it with probiotics. That's really it. I mean, there's other things, when you're looking at damage to the stomach, I mean, there's other things that you want to look at too. Like repairing the mucosal lining, reestablishing normal intestinal permeability and things like that. But I don't think that this would be a situation where you're really going to drastically damage any of that to the point of needing to take high dose glutamine or Pepsin GI or things like that. You could literally just replace it with probiotics. Use Natrin is a decent brand. They have some good options. You could go real strong. You go VSL3 if you wanted. Just be careful with that, because I mean, it might make you shit yourself if you don't really need that much. More isn't necessarily better. Also, I'm trying to think of the brand. Renew Life has pretty solid products. There's several, but I wouldn't think shouldn't really need to do anything fancy. Your gut should repair itself on its own. Volume or frequency for calves? Well, I will be the first to say my calves aren't that great. I have very, 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 very high insertions in my calves, which is, unfortunately, that's a genetic thing. For people that have really high insertions, there's only so much you can do. You can make that calf as bulgy and funky looking as you want. It's only going to do so much. You're never going to have that low hanging calf that attaches down by your ankle. It's not going to happen. However, for me, the one thing I've found that helps is definitely frequency. And also with that frequency is variation. So you could probably, if you wanted to talk about different muscle fiber types and the type of training stimulus they respond to, this is probably a situation where that's probably valid because of where the calves are located, what they do, how much you use them, and so on and so forth. Yes, they can take a beating. They do a lot of aerobic. They do a lot of aerobic work, I guess, if you want to call it that, because they just move all the time. So I like to use variation with them, variety of rep ranges, and pretty much rotate every session between some higher rep sets, some moderate rep sets with a heavy weight, and then also doing like some longer time under tension sets with with loaded stretches, so aka like DC calves and things like that, DC calf training. So frequency and variety would be the biggest thing. Yeah, I mean, but that if you do higher frequency, it's probably going to be higher volume anyhow, usually, if just because you're training them more often. Not necessarily, you could do like 1 or 2 sets of calves, I guess, per session, but if you're doing, 3, 4, 5 sets or whatever in a session and do them every session or close, it's going to be, I guess, higher volume. I guess it depends on what higher volume relative to what, right? But yeah, frequency and variety. Train them like good contractions, pushing through, pushing all the way through the big toe when you contract, things like that, not just bouncing everything, good range of motion, so on and so forth. So yeah, the calves, unfortunately, are whole nother animal. They can grow if you have very bad calf genetics. You can still make them grow if you're really diligent about it, but it's definitely tough. All right. When dieting down, stress or total allostatic load is high. It's purported that it can affect weight loss. If in a calorie deficit, how does stress slow down or stop weight loss? Is this actually true, or is it more relative to the type of weight loss, i.e. fat or additional held water from higher cortisol? Well, no, it's not true that if you're in a deficit, that stress is directly going to stop you. The problem is the stress is making it a lot more difficult to create the deficit, right? That's the problem, because it's causing more adaptation. So you're constantly having to push more and more and more and more to create that deficit. That's really where the problem lies. And then obviously that also comes with its own, with its own cons, right? And you got to think about, well, where are you going to be after the deficit phase is over? What kind of atrocious situation are you going to be in and have to recover from too? So, I mean, there's a lot to think about there. But no, it's not going to defy the laws of thermodynamics of being in a calorie deficit. The problem is it just makes it much, much, much more difficult to actually get into that deficit. And sometimes to the point of being pretty dangerous too. Like, especially if we're talking like females, for example, if we have a high allostatic load, like just tons of stress, and there's a lot of other things going on downstream, we're talking about long-term issues that can take a very long time to fix afterwards. So we can't just ignore that the stress is there and just continue to try to make a deficit. If we end up with high cortisol and then eventually progesterone steal, and eventually, amenorrhea, loss of menstrual cycles, and then they end up with estrogen dominance, and then end up with thyroid disorder, and then end up with an autoimmune issue, and end up with hyperandrogenism, PCOS, all these things like that. Yeah, cool, you created a deficit and you lost extra 5 pounds, but you completely fucked up their health for who knows how long. And a lot of people don't even know how to fix that stuff, nor do they have the patience to do it. You know what I mean? So that's a different rabbit hole. Like, I deal with that stuff a lot though, and it's frustrating because I'm grateful that I'm able to help people on that stuff, and it does take a very long time to fix a lot of those things. But yeah, you can't ignore that. These people that are just die-hard calories in, calories out people just completely ignore some of the very basic hormonal and metabolic adaptions and things that occur. And it's not always as simple as just doing your refeed. Like, there's a little more to it. So no, it will not defy the calorie deficit. It just makes the calorie deficit more difficult to achieve and causes other downstream negative effects. Then you start feeling worse, and then your total energy expenditure goes down because you feel terrible and you don't want to move. You can't function, you can't do anything, so on and so forth. Have a lot of long-term health issues. I mean, there's a 1,000,001 bad things that can happen there. So I get your question, but you got to be careful with that, right? You got to be careful with that train of thought, because it can get you into trouble. And that's not just females, it's males too. It is men as well. It definitely happens. And then you mentioned holding water from higher cortisol. So yeah, that's also, let's say you take two people with the same body fat. One's super stressed out, high inflammation. They are not going to look as good as the other person, even if they're probably the same body fat, right? And same lean body mass. One of them's going to look a lot better than the other one, you know? So yes, I get what you're saying, but I wouldn't ignore it, you know? So all these things should come first, and it's going to produce the best, not only short-term look, but long-term health and, you know, health outcome, right? Okay, so next one. Somebody asked about warm-ups and how to, so as the person gets more advanced, how to go through a warm-up, because the question was actually in a private message, and they asked, because they just see that I do a lot of like work up to a top set type workout, and how they go with the warm-ups, what my train of thought is. So first off, the main thing is weight goes up, reps go down. That's most warm-up schemes for me. And usually what I recommend for the most part for advanced people. So today was a push day. I had a top set on the incline press of I think it was like 335, end up with, I think, 8 reps or something like that. All right, so I went bar times 10. In between this, I was doing some just little warm-up things. I was doing some arm circles. I was just doing like some scapula contractions. I was getting everything warmed up, loosened up. 135 for 8, 225 for 5 or 6, 315 for 2, I think. No. 275 for 2 to 3, and then 315 for 2 reps. So you can see as I got closer to the top weight, I also made smaller increments in between the warm-ups. So I went bigger increments at first, smaller increments towards the end, reps lowered as the weight got heavier. I still have energy to do my top set, but my CNS is also fired up and ready to go, and I'm acclimated to the weight. All right. There's always going to be situations where things might not feel quite right. You want to do that 225 warm-up set twice. Okay, that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. The point is, though, to enough fiber recruitment, get everything firing, get your CNS firing, feeling good under the weight, getting used to it, so on and so forth, but not, just blowing all your energy and not being able to do the top set. So if you're doing, it depends on how your program is written, but if it's a goal of an all-out top set with maximal effort and maximal outcome, then yeah, you don't want to. That's what you want. If you want to do 10 reps on your top set, do you want to do 5 warm-ups of 10 reps each, working up in weight? Well, nah, you're going to be fatigued. But if that's if that's what you're looking for to accumulate more volume, that's fine. But that's not what I'm looking for with this type of question or rep and set scheme. So yeah, that's really the gist of it. And then also, heavier weight might take more warm-ups. Just general stuff like that. I mean, you would expect that anyhow. My bicep curl is going to take less warm-ups than my squat, right? So warm up, maybe bigger jumps at first, slow the jumps down, lower the reps as you go. There you go. That's the general idea, right? All right, let me see if, I'm not sure, I thought I had one more, but I might not. Hold on 1 minute. Some of these get shuffled up into these DMs. No, I think that's it. But I did have one more question that I did want to add to this. I thought you guys might like it. So it was about one of my training sessions. Someone had asked. This kind of goes with the warm-up question. It's an interesting one. So I was wondering, on your pre-session routine,
As an advanced guy, do you need a couple of hours to get right psychologically to train? I've noticed since I've actually been doing a routine based on progressive overload in the last 4 years, that it's taken me substantially longer to get focused enough to train. But I don't know if it's just me or if it's something that everyone usually gets to with advancement. Yeah, I mean, psychologically, you have a lot more. It's kind of psychological warfare at a point, right? When you have essentially you have like one set per exercise to improve on. That's it. You want, and everything goes into that. It is a lot to think about. It's a lot of pressure sometimes. But it's funny because I almost do the opposite of what he's talking about here, in that I try to think about it less. I psych myself up too much, and I'm so amped that I'm having a hard time like going through the motion with control and not just rage. I mean, you guys, a lot of people that are watching this that have seen me train, like I get really amped, but I try to control it and contract and, you know, be locked into the movement. You can definitely get so amped that you mess everything up or psych yourself out, especially on exercises that I've been really having to grind to make progression on, and I just know that this set is going to be so terrible, painful, agonizing, oxygen debt, can't breathe, lungs burning, face melting, puke right here, ready to come out, all that stuff. And it's hard. It's difficult to get amped up for, but you have to focus and you can't overthink things. You have to be, one, confident about the weight, warmed up correctly, and then just do it. You know, had a good set of squats this week. It was a PR, at least with the bar. I was using a different bar. Got 2 reps more than last week. And I thought a lot less this week. I got up to the bar. So I got up to the bar and I was pacing. I pace a lot and scream and all that ridiculous shit that you guys don't see on the camera. I do that on the camera, but I do it a lot more off the camera. So I got up to the bar, and then I was starting to think about it, like, oh shit, can I beat this? Because last week was so tough. And so no, I shut it off. I cut it off. I got under there. I unracked it, and then it was go time. And got it. You know, I got it. I'm not saying that's always going to work, but that seems to be, for me, think enough, don't think too much, right? I'm not going to sit there for 2 hours and psych myself up, because I will literally be drained before my session even starts. And I do the same thing when I warm up as well. So we're talking about warm-ups. This is kind of just a nuance, right? Especially when you're going for these maximal type top set scheme. Don't psych yourself up more than you need to on these warm-ups. It's funny because, you know, like I did the squats yesterday. So yesterday was squats with the Rhinoflex bar, and it ended up being top set was 4 1/4, 4 plates aside and 1/4, and I warmed up to 4 plates, and the 4 plate, it's crazy because the 4 plate one felt kind of heavy. Like, shit, you know, how am I going to get full for like 2 or 3 reps? I'm like, this feels kind of heavy. How am I going to do 4 1/4 for 12 or 10 or whatever? But I wasn't amped up at all. I was just kind of going through it. I was focusing on the muscle. I was, you know, getting it going. And then on that last one, that last heavy warm up kind of got my CNS woken up a little bit, because I was like, you know, I started to shake a little bit because it was heavy. It was heavy enough. And then zone in, then spike that cortisol, then spike that adrenaline, like save that adrenal reserve for when it's time to go. So that's a little bit about, you know, pre-training rituals and warm-ups and things like that. If that interests you guys. If you're not a psycho, then, you know, keep doing your pump sets and high volume 3-hour workouts or whatever you guys do. But
I'm just kidding. I have clients that do high volume some, so it is what it is. Different stuff works for different people, but that's kind of my take, what works for me. I hope that's helpful to you guys, and we'll talk to you next week.